They say some places hold on to memories, that the walls themselves remember what happened within them. On a quiet street in the small town of Bellwood, no one expected anything extraordinary. The lawns were trimmed, the lights flickered at night, and the neighbors greeted each other like clockwork. But one night, something broke the rhythm, and the calm that had covered Bellwood for years was ripped away in a matter of hours. It began with a call to the police at exactly 2:13 a.m. The voice on the other end was trembling, a woman barely able to get the words out. "There's blood," she whispered. So much blood. Officers arrived minutes later at 42 Maple Drive, a two-story house with white shutters and a broken porch light. The house looked ordinary, but what waited inside would scar the entire town forever. When the first officer stepped through the doorway, the smell hit him before he saw anything: metallic, heavy, unmistakable. In the living room, the scene was chaos. A coffee table overturned, a lamp shattered, and on the carpet, a crimson pool that seemed too large for one person. The officer called for backup, his voice unsteady. Upstairs they found the rest of the horror, a trail of smeared footprints leading to the master bedroom, where silence hung like a weight in the air. That night would become known as the night Bellwood changed forever. The victims were the Hargrove family. Daniel, a quiet 43-year-old engineer, his wife Claire, and their 16-year-old daughter Lily. By morning, news vans had already gathered outside the street, their bright lights cutting through the early fog. Reporters whispered words like slaughter and massacre, but the police refused to release any details. They said it was too early, that the investigation was just beginning. Yet for the people who lived nearby, it was already too late. Fear had taken root. Detectives worked through the night, piecing together what they could. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks, no smashed windows. Whoever did this had either been invited in or already lived there, and that question would haunt the investigation from the start. Daniel's co-workers described him as the kind of man who kept to himself. No enemies, no debts, nothing suspicious. Claire was the opposite. Bright, social, always organizing events in the neighborhood. And Lily, their daughter, was the quiet type, more comfortable behind a camera than in front of one. She kept an online journal where she posted her photographs, landscapes, abandoned places, and lately, strange pictures of the woods behind their house. When detectives checked her last post, they noticed something chilling. The final image she uploaded was a photo of their backyard, taken at dusk. But in the bottom corner of the frame, barely visible, was a figure, dark, standing near the tree line, watching the house. That photo was uploaded just 4 hours before the murders. The town was shaken. Parents stopped letting their kids walk to school. Doors that had never been locked before were suddenly sealed every night. But the deeper police dug, the stranger things became. The security cameras at nearby homes showed no one entering or leaving the Hargrove property that night. No vehicles, no movement. Yet somehow, 3 people were dead inside a locked house. Rumors began to spread. Some said Daniel had been hiding something. Others whispered that the daughter's photos had captured more than just a stalker, that she'd found something she wasn't supposed to see. None of it made sense, until a discovery 5 days later changed everything. Behind the house, through the dense woods that Lily used to photograph, officers found a small clearing. In the center stood an old wooden shed, half collapsed and covered in vines. Inside were objects that didn't belong: a camera tripod, a stained tarp, and a series of Polaroid photos pinned to the wall. The pictures showed the Hargrove family, but not the way anyone had seen them before. They were candid shots, taken from outside their windows weeks before the murders. Someone had been watching them. Every picture was dated and labeled, except one. The last photo, darker and more recent, showed Daniel sitting on the couch, reading a newspaper. Behind him, in the reflection of the TV screen, was that same dark figure again. The evidence pointed to an intruder who had studied them, tracked their habits, and waited for the perfect night. But the police still had no idea who it was. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing to trace. That's when the case took an unexpected turn, one that even the detectives couldn't believe. When the coroner's report came back, It revealed something that didn't fit the timeline. Daniel's estimated time of death was between 1:20 and 1:30 a.m. But Claire and Lily had both died nearly half an hour earlier. It meant Daniel was alive, long enough to see what happened to his family. The living room scene, with the struggle and the overturned furniture, was likely his final attempt to fight back. But against who? Neighbors started to recall strange things from the weeks before. One man said he'd seen a car parked near the woods late at night, always the same one, an old dark sedan. Another neighbor said she'd heard screaming once. But when she looked out, the Hargrove house was quiet and dark. Everyone had seen something small, something they brushed off at the time. Now it all felt like a pattern they had missed until it was too late. The investigation reached a breaking point when the police obtained the contents of Lily's old camera from her school locker. Most of the memory card contained ordinary photos, trees, animals, sunsets, until the final video file. It was recorded the night of the murders, time-stamped 12:05. The video began with static, then the faint sound of wind through the trees. Lily's voice could be heard whispering, "I think someone's out there again." The camera pointed toward her window, showing the edge of the backyard. Then a shadow moved, tall, deliberate. Lily gasped, and the camera fell sideways. The last few seconds showed the figure turning toward the house. Then the screen went black. That was the last moment anyone ever saw Lily alive. Detectives now knew that whoever the figure was had entered the house shortly after that recording. The question was how. The locks were intact, the windows unbroken. Then they noticed something about the basement door. It had been repainted just a week earlier, and underneath the paint, the edges were chipped and worn. When they forced it open, they found scratch marks on the inside as if the latch had been tampered with from below. Someone had already been inside the house, hiding, waiting. It was clear now, the killer didn't break in that night. He'd been there for days. Police searched the basement and found a small sleeping bag, a flashlight, food wrappers, and more photos of the family. Whoever did this had lived right beneath them, listening to their lives unfold above him. Every conversation, every laugh, every fight, waiting for the night he would strike. But even with all this evidence, no one could identify him. The fingerprints on the basement items didn't match any in the system. The car seen by neighbors was unregistered. It was as if the man had appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Bellwood had become a ghost town. The house on Maple Drive stood empty, windows boarded up, the lawn overgrown. But the story refused to fade. People still drove by, slowed down, and stared as if expecting to see a shadow behind the curtains. And for some, they swore they actually did. Months passed, but the silence around the Hargrove case only grew louder. The investigation had hit a dead end, and the media moved on to the next headline. But for the residents of Bellwood, the story lingered like smoke that refused to fade. Every creak in the night, every flicker of light in an empty window made them think of that house. And for Detective Allen, the lead investigator, walking away was never an option. Allen was a man obsessed. He kept every photo, every report, every theory pinned across the walls of his office. He'd stare at them for hours, convinced there was something everyone else had missed. Then one night, while going through the crime scene photos again, he noticed something strange. A reflection on the glass frame above the Hargrove's staircase. It showed part of the hallway, and in that reflection, faint but visible, was a face. It wasn't any of the victims. Allen sent the photo for enhancement. The result revealed the outline of a man's face, pale, narrow, with a scar near the jaw. The time-stamp matched the time paramedics arrived, which meant whoever it was had still been inside the house when first responders got there. Somehow the killer had stayed just out of sight as police flooded the scene. He'd been watching even then. The realization hit Allen hard. The killer hadn't vanished. He'd been close enough to see the chaos he caused. Maybe even close enough to blend in. That's when the detective made a decision that would consume the next months of his life, to re-interview every single person who had been at the house that night. Officers, paramedics, photographers, anyone who had stepped inside 42 Maple Drive. That's how he met Michael Lane, a freelance photographer who'd been hired by the local news outlet to capture footage of the scene the morning after the murders. Michael was polite, soft-spoken and calm. Too calm, Alan thought, considering the nature of what he'd photographed. When asked about the images, Michael said something that stayed with Alan. He said, "It was like the house wanted me to see it." Alan dismissed it at first, chalking it up to nerves. But something about Michael's demeanor felt rehearsed, like he'd said those words before. When the detective checked the photo metadata, one detail didn't add up. The timestamps were earlier than the official time the media was allowed near the property. Someone had taken pictures from inside the police line before dawn. Alan obtained a search warrant for Michael's studio. Inside, he found hundreds of photographs pinned across the walls, not just of the Hargroves, but of other families in the area. Different homes, different faces, all taken from a distance. Most of the photos were marked with dates and times, just like the ones in the shed. In the center of the wall, one photograph stood out. It was the Hargrove house, but taken from inside the woods at night. And in the corner of the photo, just barely visible, was Lily's camera, pointed right back. Michael was brought in for questioning. At first he denied everything, said the photos were part of a documentary project, something about suburban isolation. But when confronted with the evidence from the basement, his calm cracked, his hands trembled, his eyes darted toward the door as if measuring the distance. Then, quietly, he said, "You don't understand. I didn't choose them. The house did." Those words sent chills through the room. Detective Allen leaned in, asking what he meant, but Michael wouldn't elaborate. He just repeated it slower this time, almost whispering, "It wanted me there." When police searched further into Michael's background, the pieces started falling into place. He had moved to Bellwood 6 months before the murders. His previous address was linked to another unsolved case in Narrated County. A family found dead under similar circumstances. The father last seen arguing with a photographer days before the killings. No one had ever been charged. Michael fit every pattern, but without a confession, the prosecution needed solid evidence. That came unexpectedly from a memory card recovered during a deeper search of his studio. The files were corrupted, but one video was partially playable. The footage showed the inside of the Hargrove basement, dimly lit, shaky, recorded from a low angle. In the background, faint footsteps could be heard upstairs. Then, Daniel's voice, calling for Claire. A few seconds later, Michael's voice, calm and detached, saying, "Don't worry, it'll all be over soon." That was enough. Michael Lane was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The trial became a national sensation. The media called him the Watcher of Bellwood, a name that would stick long after the verdict. During the proceedings, the prosecution presented a horrifying narrative that Michael had stalked the family for weeks, broken into their basement and lived beneath them while planning their deaths. His motive remained unclear, though psychologists later described him as exhibiting extreme obsession and delusional attachment patterns. When the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts, there was no reaction from Michael. He simply looked at the courtroom wall, expressionless, as if waiting for something that never came. The Hargrove house was demolished a year later. The town wanted to forget,